I think a lot of people see it as just very superficial, but it's so much more than that, isn't it? You know, it cuts really deeply.
Dehumanization of black women when it comes to hair and beauty.
Because you're discriminating against someone based on the texture of their hair. And the texture of our hair is very much linked to our blackness.
When you're basically being told the way that your hair looks makes you unattractive or just a complete afterthought.
We have this weight. Our hair is so politicized. Our hair speaks for us before we have spoken.
How long it takes for you to kind of heal from the amount of racial trauma, especially microaggressions and hair discrimination.
Hi, I'm Femi Feto, and I'm a contributing editor at British Vogue. Welcome to the very first Vogue Talks. Today, we'll be discussing hair discrimination. This is a forum where we have open and honest conversations around big talking points. Joining me today are three fantastic women who are all trailblazers in their individual fields. There's Leomi Anderson, who is a model and an entrepreneur. Leomi, welcome.
Hey girl.
Welcome. There's Yomi Adegoke, who is a journalist, a broadcaster, and the best-selling author of Slaying Your Lane.
Hi, Femi.
Hi. And Agnes Makatuma,
Hi, Femi.
who is the co-founder of Black Minds Matter charity. I would love to know, because a lot of people actually have no idea that it actually exists or that it's a thing. And I'd love to know, from your perspective, how you define it, and also what your earliest memory of hair discrimination was. So Yomi, talk to me about your early experiences of hair discrimination.
Oh God. So I wouldn't say it's necessarily of discrimination, but definitely of like internalized, anti-blackness is, especially in a household where I was very much like, you know, I have a fair-skinned mum who has like really quite nice hair, to be honest, like nice by, you know, in the good hair standards. She had like long hair, and you know, she was very much like with her dark-skinned children, like, you guys have got to love yourselves, you've got to love your hair, all of this. Didn't even let me relax my hair. And yet I still have such a memory of getting out the shower, putting my towel around my head and my tights from school, and I feel like this.
Oh yeah.
Like I said, just practice that.
And again, it's like, I don't even know where that came from. As I said, like my older sister's, how old? She's like a good 6 years older than me. When, I'll never forget, it was the Italian issue of Vogue when it had all the black models. She ran out to get it. My sister's like beauty icons like Alex Weck, dark-skinned black women, short hair and stuff like that. And I still ended up being like, but I want long straight hair.
But we have these subliminal messaging all around us. You know, you look at the adverts, look at the marketing, look at the, you know, the huge billboards, look at the huge big brands. You know, what are they selling us? They are selling us this ideal hair, which is never Afro hair. It's always swishy.
Exactly.
It's always moving.
It's always moving.
And it's always growing in the way. Stiff wear. It's always growing in the way that ours doesn't naturally
Didn't matter
grow.
what my mum said.
Yeah.
Love her.
Exactly. Yeah.
Don't internalize it.
And Leomi, what have you found? What were your experiences?
Boy, we could talk all day when it comes to my experiences of hair discrimination. I feel like, honestly, I didn't even think about my hair or having a different type of hair to people until I entered into the modeling industry. That's when I became hyper aware of my blackness, and I was kind of told from the jump that my blackness was a disadvantage. And so therefore, everything about me was going to be a disadvantage. I entered into the industry and I had permed hair, and my hair was really long, and they would really celebrate that. And they'd be like, oh my gosh, why can't all black girls just have hair like yours? And like in the beginning, when you're young, you're just thinking, oh, thanks for the compliments. I didn't even see it as anything bad. I was only 14 years old. Everyone's trusting these people to do the best for you, but they never did the best by black girls.
I think I would define hair discrimination as, you know, the inability and the barrier to show up as yourself. So always being kind of put into this box of how you can present yourself, and having to go through so many different phases in your life without actually being able to show up as your true self. I think my earliest experience of hair discrimination was definitely in Devon. I lived in Devon and Torquay for about 12 years, and you'd be very surprised to know I'd never actually been to a hairdresser in those 12 years because...
So what did you...
I've walked into, you know, I tried loads of times to go into hairdressers and you'd get the standard, sorry, we don't really have the right products for you, or sorry, we don't really do black hair, like just straight up, like we can't cater to Afro hair. So I had to learn how to do my hair on YouTube. And then the hardest part was I was living in a town that didn't have any hair products, no Afro hair products in Boots or just the high street. So I had to order things online without even testing it or looking. It was just like a risk the whole way through. And that was the first time I realized, you know, it's tough being a black girl. And I had to take matters into my own hands. I went to Torquay last year in March and I forgot my conditioner. It's 2020, I know I haven't been to Torquay in like a few years. Nothing. The closest I could get to Afro hair was what's it called? There's like this brand, but it's not even, it's for curly hair apparently, but that's not.
It's not Afro hair.
It's not Afro hair. Like I need that extra slip in my conditioner.
That is always so terrifying when you go somewhere, and I don't know if anyone else feels that. When you go somewhere, you leave your hair products. Like that
The anxiety.
for me, it's anxiety inducing because you know you're just not going to find your stuff because it's just not available. And this is the thing, I think, with hair discrimination. I think a lot of people see it as just very superficial and it's just about aesthetics, but it's so much more than that,
It's so much more than that,
you know, it cuts really deeply. I mean, it really has such an impact, a significant impact. So my local hair shop, they were doing sort of a kind of takeaway service. So you would order certain things online, or you would, you know, go to the store and you would sort of peek in and kind of go, yeah, I need that and I need that. And they'd bring it out and you'd pay and you'd do it that way. But prior to that, at the beginning of lockdown, black hair shops didn't open.
They weren't deemed as essential.
They weren't deemed as essential. And I do remember, and it's almost like you have that sense that you knew that was coming. You knew that those shops would not stay open. They wouldn't be deemed as essential. You know, everyone was panicked because you knew that I would not be able to get my stuff. And even when the shops do close and you think, well, okay, maybe I can get something on Amazon if I can just about find it, or I can get a few bits somewhere else that has a really tiny collection of black hair products, you know that you are going to pay 2 or 3 times more than you normally would. And I think a lot of brands still conflate curly hair with Afro hair. It's not the same.
No, this 4C
There's
hair,
a
honey, is
spectrum
not.
of Afro hair. You know, black hair is not monolithic. Even within the so-called very, very Afro hair, there's so many different textures within that. We need different products.
And you want to know what? Like, I feel like what they try and do is act like, oh, there's just so much variety within the black community that we just can't cater to everybody. But you have a million different types of blonde hair dye, this, that. So don't try and say that black hair has too much going on when you literally will supply like 15, 20 different shades for one hair color alone, not even hair type, one hair color alone has a whole range of products. Blue shampoo, pink, this, that, but for black hair, it's like, oh no, you guys have too much going on. It doesn't make any sense.
It doesn't.
It really doesn't.
And it's just not just about the aesthetics. It's so much deeper than that. You know, no one wants to, I mean, hair discrimination in many ways is a nice name for it. Essentially, it's another form of racism.
Absolutely.
That's essentially what it is, because you're discriminating against someone based on the texture of their hair. And the texture of our hair is very much linked to our blackness. So, you know, I think that when people start to look at it in that way and think about it in that way, then hopefully it will start making them think a little bit more deeply about their biases around black hair and black hairstyles. So, Leomi, I want to focus on you and your career in the modeling industry. You're one of the few super successful black models. You did a TED Talk, which was brilliant.
Thank you.
Where you mentioned an incident with a white male hairstylist. And I guess for people who haven't watched it, and they should watch it because it's utterly brilliant.
You heard her.
Really, and really insightful. But I'd love you to talk about that experience and just also to share your experience of how it has been for you in the modeling industry as a black woman with Afro hair.
Definitely, because you want to know what's so funny? When I hear everybody speaking about how society projects this image of how hair should be and what is acceptable, I was literally in the fields experiencing that, because these images that everyone sees, I'm part of that. And when I first entered into the industry, I didn't think that my hair was going to be something that was going to be so politicized. I was 14 years old. I was thinking it was going to be like, oh, this amazing world where as long as you work hard, everything's going to be great. No. And I've had many experiences of hair discrimination, running to the toilets, crying, having to defend my hair simply because they didn't know what to do with it. And I was just turned 17 years old. I was backstage at a show in Milan, one of my biggest shows that I was doing at the time. I was super excited to be there. And what actually I didn't even explain in my TED Talk was that the day before, when I had done the fitting for the show, the designer had said, I don't want you to put any extensions or anything in your hair. I want you just to have your own hair and we'll have it back, have it clean. Like, I don't want you to have the same look as the other girls, which already is something that was a very big issue actually when I first began modeling. So this hairdresser decided, nope, we're still gonna do the same look as everybody else, but they're not even going to attempt to do it in a more cautious way. So they glued rows and rows and rows and rows of extensions into my hair because they didn't know how to sew it in or anything like that. They weren't even thinking of taking that precaution that black hair shouldn't have rows of glue stuck into it. I do the rehearsal now. The designer's like, why is your hair like this? I already said that I want you to have your own hair. So they rip out all of the extensions. Bear in mind, I had 20 minutes before I had to go and get dressed. Ripped it out and I'm crying, but I'm just like not saying anything. I'm crying. I do the show, my hair is looking questionable. So we had to do the show 2 times. So in between this break now, I've sat down and this lead hairdresser now goes to put some beach sea salt, sizzler, whatever the spray is that they're trying to put in there.
I hate that sea salt spray.
Yeah, they love it though.
They love it though.
Bear in mind, the look is meant to be slick back here. So I remember turning and being like, oh, just so you know, if you put this product in my hair, it's gonna make my hair go curly. That's all I said, and he literally started berating me. And this is a room full of people. You don't know who you're talking to. Do you know I've been doing hair for 10 years? I could end your career right now.
Are you serious?
And this is a room full of people. And when I say every single hairdryer went off, everyone's listening and no one is defending me. No one's telling them to stop. And it went on for what felt like forever. In these situations that black models often find themselves in is that you are often told to take it on the chin. And it's like, no, this isn't just a little bit of workplace banter. This is racism. This is anti-black. This is ignorance being displayed here. And yet I'm still meant to stand here and represent this brand and represent his work. And yeah, I don't know, being a black model, it's, as I said to you before, it's actually, it can be traumatic. There's a lot of people who are complicit in that and they don't even realize the dehumanization of black women when it comes to hair and beauty.
Let's talk about microaggressions.
Yeah.
And let's talk about what they are. But the funny thing about, actually, it's a funny thing, microaggressions actually, because it's so difficult to pinpoint. And I guess that's why we call them micro. They're almost, you know, to people who don't experience them on a day-to-day basis, they have no idea it actually exists. And I just want to talk about is particularly for you who, you know, you set up Black Minds Matter during last summer, June 2020, and that was at the height of all the protests following George Floyd's death and the racial reckoning that basically blew up around the world. And you set that up in relation to people having to deal with racial trauma. And what people don't understand is that there's a link between that and your self-esteem and how people treat your hair. And I just wanted to talk to you a little bit more about that.
Yeah, thank you. I think what's really interesting about microaggressions is I know Pantene recently did the study and only 7% of people that actually were like part of the study could actually recognize what a microaggression was. And even as someone who, like I said earlier, like I grew up in a predominantly white area, it took me until I was in my 20s to look back and be like, whoa, that was a microaggression, or that was racist. And a lot of the time people really underestimate the ways in which microaggressions and discrimination really affect your self-esteem as a person, and most importantly, your mental health. Just something as simple, not simple, but something as small to someone as touching your hair. It might not seem like a big deal to them, but it's something that can actually start to make you feel as though you're this show puppy. Like, why is it I'm bringing that much negative attention towards myself? And over time, if you've experienced multiple amounts of microaggressions, you start to almost internalize a lot of, the things that you should be celebrating about yourself. You try and hide those things more just so you don't have to go through that again. After like 20 years, I realized that I had a lot of internalized issues when it came to blackness in general. And I started going to therapy. This is kind of why I started BMM, because of how helpful therapy was in addressing the amount of racial trauma that I had incurred just living in Torquay. It's time that people start checking themselves and checking how they interact with black people, both in and out of the workplace, and how that could really pour into their mental health.
What are some of the really, I guess, big microaggressions? Some of the key microaggressions that stand out in your mind that you've experienced?
Gosh, in terms of hair, I think one of the, I can't really even boil it down to a single instance, because it's just been such a part of my reality and lived experience. Just that anxiety, that genuine anxiety you would feel going from one drastic hairstyle to another. And it's like, you've gone in on Friday, your braids have been here, you've come in on Monday, they're back length, and you just don't want the context, the explanation that you're gonna have to, that constant explaining of who
it's
you
exhausting.
are, right? It's absolutely exhausting. We're women, and regardless of how we want things to be, so much of societal value is placed on appearance, whether we like that or not.
Absolutely.
And I would prefer it wasn't that way. But at the end of the day, so much of a woman's worth, unfortunately, in society is based on how she looks. So of course it's going to hurt that little bit more when you're basically being told the way that your hair looks makes you unattractive or just a complete afterthought or invisibilized. And I think as well, again, to it just being more than petty vanities and us just moaning about hair and get over it. This stuff physically is painful.
It is. I
know girls with open sores. That's one why my mum wouldn't let me relax my hair, because she was just she had to be honest, her hair could take the idea of it even being such a, you've got to take, take, relax. Her hair could take it to a certain degree, but my best friend who has the most amazing hair, she's big chopped now. I had no idea what her texture looked like, that usual story. She would have scabs, open sores. There's links between fibroids, and relaxer, all these things. And it's the physical pain, people having traction alopecia, it's war. It physically hurts. And then all the white girls that I knew at school are treating myself to the hairdressers. I'm treat? This is war for me. I'm really going to battle. I'm preparing for pain. I'm preparing for anguish.
So I've been thinking a lot about hair in the workplace, and I hear a lot of conversations around hair discrimination within the workplace, and I was thinking, well, perhaps it's different depending on what your work environment is like. We work in the media, essentially, which is seen as much more open and much more creative and so on. But there's still lots of different issues. I wanted to speak specifically to you, actually, Yomi, and I just wanted to know how you found people have reacted to you. What has been the change from, you would wear lots of extensions and have your hair in lots of different ways, and now shaving off all your hair. What has been the reaction to that, whether in the industry, within work settings and outside of it?
God, it's such a good question. One of my early jobs in journalism, I used to go in with my big afro hair, and my best friend and co-author, Elizabeth Benene, we discussed the different ways in which we were treated, because I would go into work with my afro and she was wow, the media is so different, it's so much more open, because the fact you can go to work with your afro says a lot. Oh my God, how accepting. And she was like, I could never do that, because she worked in like the corporate world. And she was like, I could never in a million years go into work with an afro. I cut it completely on a whim. And it was literally just because I experimented with pretty much every single type of hairstyle there was out there. And I was like, you know what, maybe like being bald could be cool. Let me check that out. Nothing more honestly than like aesthetic decision. And I almost feel bad when I say that, because I'm like, wow, it sounds so basic. Like, I thought I'd look cute, so I cut my hair.
And you do.
And you do. I feel like there should be more of a story, because like, you know, honestly, like I wasn't going through some sort of like, you know, like self-reflection or understanding of who I was, or some like reclamation. I just thought, oh, this is gonna look buff. And I shaved it, that was it. And when I like went back out into the world, it really was like, but why? And the why was so interesting. The idea that like you could want short hair as a black woman has always been like a thing, which is why I think most people thought it was like I was either big chopping, it was for health reasons. As I said, I've never relaxed my hair, so it wasn't that. I just thought it would look nice. As someone who used to, and still does when they get the chance, like wear really long, like straight wigs, haven't changed my personality type at all, but I'm weirdly seen as like more authentic. Like I'm more of a serious person because I don't have hair. And maybe it's the climate, I don't know, but there really has been a thing of like when I was wearing like my long wigs and stuff, people assumed an identity crisis I didn't have.
We have this weight. Our hair is so politicized. Our hair speaks for us before we have spoken. And that is not particularly liberating. Okay, so we've talked a lot about the issues that exist, the issues around hair discrimination. And we know that those issues are still there, but we also know that there are some changes afoot. I'd like to know from you, I'll start with you, Agnes. How do you feel that we can start to move forward?
Most importantly, we can just improve representation, and not just in the beauty industry, but in all industries across all boards, because I think that's where it really, like, true change really begins.
Honestly, for me, progress is gonna come when you hire more black people. But if you're a professional that's being paid to do something, I'm sorry, there's no excuse at this point, so just hire more people.
Also, if you are a hairstylist, you should be able to turn your hand to every hairstyle. And I think understanding black hair, you know, that goes back to the education aspect, is that when you understand black hair, you humanize black hair, you humanize black people, then you will treat it with the respect it deserves. You will treat it with the same level of respect that you give to Caucasian hair. And I think also that education for me goes back to schools as well. You know, I've spoken quite openly, I know we've spoken about it, how, you know, my two younger children, you know, they're, 8 and 6 now, and they've already suffered hair discrimination. One of my sons has a huge afro, and he's been told, oh, it's too big, and it's too messy, and it needs a haircut, and it's too, it's too this, it's too everything. You know, my 5-year-old, oh, he's 6 now, my 6-year-old, I remember him coming home one day, and he sprays all the stuff in his hair, and he's trying to flatten his hair. He said, oh, I need to make it flatter. I need to make it flatter. He was saying that very much as a matter of fact, I need to make it flatter. You know, that's a 6-year-old. That should not be happening. So I think having more education in schools, as well as with the stylists that exist now, I think that would be really helpful.
I think it'd be great if they could make it compulsory that if you are studying to qualify and get like an MVQ in hairdressing, that you should pass the model of being able to actually look after afro hair.
Absolutely, because then that also means that we won't have those experiences of going into a salon and them saying, no, sorry, we don't do your hair type. I think also normalizing the language that is used around afro hair, I think is incredibly important. We have a lot of products that talk about disciplining the hair, about taming the hair. It's always about doing something that the hair doesn't do naturally, rather than just celebrating the hair in and of itself. I think we all recognize that there's so much work that needs to be done in order to address the issue of hair discrimination. However, I think it's important to note the positive changes that have happened. You know, when I look at advertising, when I look at when I look at the way that black hair is represented in the media now, I can definitely see a shift. So take, for instance, those glorious covers of Vogue, you know, the April issue of Vogue with those beautiful black women. It seems like something that's so small and it shouldn't really be a talking point, but it is a talking point because it really speaks to us about just how far we've come. It's great that people are recognizing that actually there's a spectrum of Afro hair and everything within that spectrum, you know, needs to be celebrated. And like I said, you know, yes, I know there's still a lot of work to be done, but just seeing that, you know, we never really used to see that sort of representation of black hair, and seeing that in such a joyful context, I think that was beautiful. That really, really was.
For me, I think that it's so amazing that we're having these sort of conversations, because when I first began, I wished that there was people that could voice the feelings that I had inside, and that's why these sort of conversations are so important. So I'm so thankful to be on this discussion with you guys, and I think that honestly, for future generations, it's so important that we keep vocalizing how we feel, and so important that we put value on our voice, because for too long we were told that our voices weren't important, but actually we are inspiring another generation and we are giving them that voice. So I think that seeing things is amazing, but these conversations are just as intrinsically important as well.
I think one thing that I hope for black women, especially young black women, is that they are able to access the support that they need, because I firsthand know how long it takes for you to kind of heal from the amount of racial trauma, especially microaggressions and hair discrimination that you experience from a young age. I hope that there are more services, especially mental health services, that are catered to addressing microaggressions, because I know the amount of times that you can be gaslit when you go to the doctors and you're told, you know, it's not really that much of a big deal. I don't think you need to go on a wait list for counselling simply because a bunch of kids at school have touched your hair. I know what that feels like, so I hope that there's not that much health discrimination when it comes to considering black women's problems and just listening to black women and respecting that their voices need to be valued, their voices need to be protected as well. I just hope that we can be taken a little bit more seriously when we talk about these issues.
So I think we're gonna see hopefully like a generation of kids with healthier hair, like maintaining our edges, like just making sure that we're not burning our scalps to a crisp in the name of beauty, essentially. And I think that's like, yeah, like a big key difference that I'm very excited to see, just people having healthy hair and scalps, essentially.
Yeah. Definitely.
Well, this has been a really incredible conversation with incredible women. And I'm so thankful that you all were here today to have this inspiring and very honest and very insightful conversation around the issue of hair discrimination. So Leomi, Yomi, Agnes, thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you.